there is something fundamentally broken in the way we build today. In 1872, a survey was conducted on the Borgund Stave Church, a traditional wooden structure in Norway during one of the harshest winters in decades. Outside, the mercury had plunged to -31 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow lay several feet deep. The wind howled through the valley with enough force to shred a modern expedition tent. Yet inside this wooden church, built in 1180, with no HVAC system, no fiberglass insulation, and no double-paned windows, the temperature held steady at 46 degrees Fahrenheit. There was no fire burning, no external energy source. The structure itself, built from solid wood using methods we've largely abandoned, kept the temperature stable. Compare that to a modern American single-family home. Cut the heat when it's 14 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Within 6 hours, your indoor temperature drops below freezing. After 12 hours, your pipes burst. After 24 hours, the house is uninhabitable. What did builders 800 years ago know that we have forgotten? In the mountainous regions of Scandinavia, hundreds of log cabins built between the 13th and 17th centuries are still standing. These structures have survived for centuries. They've endured winters that would rot a modern stick-built house in weeks. And they achieved this with 3 things that are completely ignored in our modern international building code: thermal mass, absolute air tightness, and a heating strategy based not on constant energy consumption, but on strategic heat storage. These 3 principles worked as a complete system. No single trick, no miracle product. Just a physically sound concept that worked with nature, not against it. Today, we build against physics. We try to fight the cold with brute force energy, and we are losing. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with a grid failure or blackout in winter? How long did your house stay warm? An hour? 6 hours? Or could you see your breath after 30 minutes? Let us know, because what you're about to learn will change how you look at every modern building. Let's rewind to 2010. A research team at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology ran an experiment. They took 2 identical structures, both roughly 430 square feet. The first was a reconstructed medieval log cabin built to 14th century specs. Solid logs, 12 inches in diameter, hand-hewn, joined with tongue and groove. No modern insulation, no vapor barrier, no pink fiberglass. The second was a modern prefabricated house, built to current stringent energy standards. Double insulation, R value of 25, vapor barriers, triple glazed windows. On paper, the modern house was miles ahead of the medieval one. Both were placed in the same valley. Outside temperature, -18 degrees Fahrenheit. Both were heated to a comfortable 68 degrees. Then they cut the power. The modern house plummeted to 36 degrees Fahrenheit within 9 hours. The log cabin, after 48 hours, the inside temperature was still 54 degrees. After 72 hours, 3 full days without heat, it was still sitting at 43 degrees, well above freezing. The modern house had become a life-threatening icebox, while the medieval cabin remained survivable. Why? A modern civil engineer might say that's impossible. The R value of the log cabin is only around 10. The modern house boasts an R 25. A higher R value means better insulation, so the modern house should win. But R value only measures heat transfer in a steady state. It completely ignores thermal mass, and thermal mass is the game changer. A 12-inch thick log wall of old-growth pine weighs about 80 pounds per linear foot. Wood has a high specific heat capacity, meaning it can bank enormous amounts of energy. When the cabin is heated, the wood absorbs that heat deep into its core. When the heat source stops, the wood slowly releases it back over hours and days. The modern house? The walls are a sandwich of 1/2-inch drywall, a plastic vapor barrier, fiberglass batting, and thin vinyl or wood siding. The whole assembly weighs maybe 10 pounds per linear foot. There is zero mass to store heat. The insulation slows down the heat loss, but it stores nothing. As soon as the furnace quits, the heat in the air bleeds out through tiny leaks and thermal bridges. And because modern stick framing has no thermal mass, there is no reservoir to recharge the room. Medieval builders understood this instinctively. They harvested trees that were at least 80 to 100 years old. Trees grow slowly in the frozen north. The growth rings are incredibly tight, often over 100 rings per inch. This makes the wood insanely dense and heavy. 1 cubic foot of old-growth pine weighs over 37 pounds. Modern plantation pine, maybe 28 pounds. That density is crucial. More mass means more storage. More storage means a longer thermal lag. It takes 12 to 18 hours for the outside cold to penetrate a 12-inch dense log wall. By then you've likely rebuilt your fire. The cabin acts like a thermal battery, smoothing out the temperature spikes. But mass alone isn't enough. You need absolute airtightness. Here lies the second secret. Despite all our Tyvek wraps and flashing tapes, modern homes leak like sieves. Blower door tests show that the average modern home has a cumulative leak equivalent to leaving a 20 by 20 inch window wide open. That is not an exaggeration. Add up every gap around your outlets, baseboards and windows, and that's the hole you're heating. When it's 5 below zero, cold air is pouring through that hole 24/7. Your furnace isn't fighting the walls, it's fighting an invisible open window. The log cabins didn't have this issue. The logs were joined using a scribe fit technique. Each log was custom cut to mirror the shape of the one below it. This took weeks. A single room could take months to frame. But the result was a wall with virtually zero airflow. Then came the chinking. The gaps were packed with sphagnum moss from the bogs. This moss can absorb 20 times its weight in water. When dried and compressed, it expands into every microscopic crevice. Over that, they applied a daub of clay mixed with animal hair, usually sheep or goat. The clay dries hard, creating an airtight seal, while the hair acts like rebar to prevent cracking. It's a breathable system. Vapor can escape, but drafts cannot enter. When researchers test these 600-year-old cabins today, many meet or exceed modern passive house airtightness standards. A hut built with an axe and moss is tighter than a suburban home built with high-tech composites. The third element is the heating strategy. This is where it gets interesting. We tend to think of old cabins having open fireplaces. But open fireplaces are thermal disasters. They suck massive amounts of warm indoor air and blast it up the chimney. A roaring open fire can actually make a house colder by creating negative pressure. Instead, the Scandinavians used masonry heaters, known as kakelung or soapstone stoves. These are massive units built of stone or brick weighing several tons. You burn a hot, fast fire once or twice a day. The combustion is complete and clean. But instead of the exhaust shooting straight out, it winds through a labyrinth of channels inside the stone mass. The gas transfers its heat to the stone before it ever reaches the chimney. By the time the smoke exits, it's barely warm. All that energy is trapped in the stone. This stone mass then radiates heat gently for 12 to 18 hours. The surface stays at around 140 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to feel good, but safe to touch. You can lean against it. You can sleep on it. The heat is radiant, meaning it warms objects and people, not just the air. Radiant heat creates comfort at lower air temperatures. You can feel cozy in 60-degree air if you are near a 160-degree stone wall. A modern forced air system has to pump the air to 72 degrees to give you the same feeling. That is a massive waste of energy. A Finnish study from 2003 reconstructed a traditional smoke room, an early cabin style, and tested it at minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit. A single 2-hour fire using about 45 pounds of wood kept the interior above 59 degrees for over 16 hours. The fuel consumption was about 1/10 of what a modern home with an oil furnace would burn in the same period. And that's without modern insulation. Just thermal mass, air tightness and radiant heat. Interior design played a huge role too. Scandinavian cabins didn't do open concept. Modern open floor plans are a nightmare for efficiency. Warm air rises and gets trapped in vaulted ceilings while your feet freeze. Medieval cabins had low ceilings, often just 6.5 feet high. Rooms were small and compartmented by doors. This kept the heat where the people were. The central room for cooking and working was the warmest. Bedrooms were cooler, but that didn't matter because you slept under heavy wool and furs. This thermal zoning slashed heating needs. There was no need to keep the guest room at 70 degrees. We have completely forgotten this logic in our quest for massive great rooms. Then there's the foundation. Modern US homes are often built on slab-on-grade concrete. Concrete is a thermal bridge. It sucks heat out of your house and dumps it into the frozen ground. Scandinavian cabins stood on stone piers that lifted the wood off the dirt. This created an air gap that acted as insulation. The floors were thick planks, often double-layered with sawdust or moss packed in between. This broke the thermal bridge. No heat bled into the earth. Every detail was designed to hoard heat. Why did we stop building this way? 3 reasons: speed, cost, and cheap oil. After World War II, we needed millions of houses fast. Scribing logs and hand-cutting joints took too long. Stick framing with 2x4s and plywood took weeks, not months. Labour was expensive, but materials needed to be cheap. Thin walls with batting were cheaper than solid timber. And then the energy boom. In the 50s and 60s, oil and gas were dirt cheap. Who cared if a house was inefficient? You just cranked the thermostat. We stopped building for resilience and started building for low upfront cost. We built houses that are on life support, dependent on a constant drip of electricity and gas. Cut the line and they die. But energy isn't cheap anymore. The grid is becoming unstable. And people are realizing their expensive homes are fragile. In Europe, specifically Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, there is a massive movement back to solid wood construction, mass timber. It's not nostalgia, it's physics. Architects are combining traditional log principles with modern tech, thick cross-laminated timber, CLT, walls, masonry heaters, and smart compact layouts. They are seeing massive drops in energy use. A well-built solid wood home can run on 1/3 of the energy of a conventional build. And if the power goes out, it stays livable for days. Science backs this up. A 2018 study by the University of Innsbruck tracked solid wood houses versus conventional builds over 5 years. The wood homes use 40% less heating energy in winter. In summer, they didn't even need AC because the thermal mass buffered the heat. Residents reported fewer drafts and a healthier environment. Wood naturally regulates humidity, absorbing moisture when it's damp and releasing it when it's dry. No mold, no dry air, no noisy humidifiers. And there is one more thing we rarely talk about: durability. A modern house starts dying the day it's finished. Vapor barriers rip, fiberglass settles, studs rot when water gets behind the siding. After 30 years, you're looking at major renovations. Scandinavian log cabins have stood for 600 years. As the wood settles in the first few years, the joints actually get tighter. A 50-year-old log home is often more efficient than a brand new one. It's an asset that appreciates in function, whereas modern builds depreciate immediately. If you are looking to build or renovate a home today that is resilient, efficient, and built to last, steal these principles. You don't have to live in a medieval hut, but you can use thermal mass. Look into mass timber or solid log construction. If you can't do solid wood walls, integrate stone mass inside. A masonry heater or a heavy stone fireplace surround can act as your thermal battery. Focus on air tightness, pay for a professional blower door test, and seal every leak. That is worth more than adding another layer of insulation. Design for compactness. Skip the cathedral ceilings if you care about efficiency. Lower ceilings and closable rooms keep the heat where you are. Use thermal zoning. Heat the living space. Let the bedrooms stay cool. And think long-term. A house that costs $50,000 more to build but saves you $100,000 in utilities and maintenance over 30 years is the smarter buy. Modern codes obsess over R-value and upfront cost. They completely ignore resilience and life cycle value. The Scandinavian farmer in his 14th century cabin wasn't primitive. He was a master of applied physics. He knew that heat needs mass. He knew air leakage is the enemy, not the cold itself. He knew radiant heat beats forced air. And he knew that working with nature beats fighting it with a furnace. We traded that wisdom for speed and cheap fossil fuels. Now that energy is expensive and the weather is getting wilder, we are paying the tab. If you found this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe. We are digging up the buried knowledge that the modern construction industry would rather you forget. The medieval log cabin wasn't an accident. It was the result of centuries of trial and error. The structures that failed the winters were abandoned. The ones that worked were copied. What remained was a system so robust it got families through minus 30-degree winters with zero electricity and zero gas. These people worked 12 hours a day, built nations and raised families. They weren't weak. They were strong because their homes sheltered them instead of draining their bank accounts. The secret wasn't lost. It was just buried under marketing and short-term thinking. Every time you build with thermal mass, seal your air leaks, and use radiant heat, you are bringing that wisdom back. Wisdom that kept people warm when the world was brutal. Wisdom that still works. Subscribe, and let's keep digging.